Hello and welcome to the aForm Show, the premier podcast for all things architecture and design across the MENA region. Welcome to your tribe. Hey, are you tired of specifying boring door hardware? If your ironmongery specs feel more meh than wow, it's time to have a look at EuroArt, the skilled British experts for door hardware, furniture fittings, glass fittings, and sliding doors that are taking your specification headaches away. From top quality pocket doors to leather wrap door handles, EuroArt offers hardware that's both durable and stunning for all budget levels. Whether you're designing or upgrading a residential or commercial project, their finishes such as satin, titanium blue, and gunmetal bring sophistication to any space. You need to match a finish or customize a pull handle to your customer's unusual design ideas? No worries, EuroArt has got you covered. For hardware that stands the test of time and looks great while doing it, visit euro-art.co.uk or send an email to hello@euro-art.co.uk or visit the EuroArt Design Center in Al Garhoud, Dubai for a touch and feel experience. Now, back to the episode. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. Today, I'm joined by Emily Mottolese, Managing Principal and Global Practice Leader at Skidmore, Owings Merrill, better known as SOM, where she's been shaping the future of urban design on a global scale. Under her leadership, SOM recently unveiled its design for Atelis down in D3, a landmark project redefining cultural architecture in the Middle East. With decades of experience spanning continents, Emily brings a unique perspective on how cities can evolve to meet the challenges of tomorrow. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you so much.
I know that we've been planning to have you on for quite a bit, so I'm quite excited to make this episode happen. And initially, I was wondering where we should start, but I think just before the episode, we had the perfect in. So I'd like to understand, obviously, everyone listening in, unless they've been living under a rock, clearly know what and who SOM are. I'd like to know, what is SOM doing in Dubai and larger Middle East? Dubai, because I know that obviously there are a couple of projects which I've seen you guys deliver over the years, but I feel like there might be some other projects which maybe a lot of people don't know that SOM were behind. And because of a lot of our audience are designers, I think it'd be quite cool for them to be like, oh, I've always wondered.
Of course. Well, I thank you so much for making the time. I'm very excited to be on your show. I made sure to do a little bit of homework since I wasn't so familiar. What are we doing in Dubai? We're doing a lot in Dubai right now, which is unique because in the years past, I can probably count on our hand the various built structures that we have locally. Obviously, Burj Khalifa, which I'm always surprised how many people don't know was an SOM creation. Rolex Tower, Cayenne, Mashreq Bank.
Yeah, this is the one that's right next to downtown, right?
Yes.
With the white spandrels and big cantilever.
The huge cantilever. Yeah, absolutely. That asset is the most recently completed in construction. And just a couple of days ago now, we have launched Atelis in D3, which is a 45-story residential tower. We're very proud of that one because we won that design as a design competition, and it's been a real global effort. The designers for that, it's been a collaboration between our LA, New York, and Dubai offices.
Wow.
So we've been able to kind of keep the design going from beginning to end, all day, all night, and move it forward. And we're psyched to see the video and the news social splash that's just gone out in the last couple of days. Besides that, we're working on a significant headquarter building on a prominent site, all of which I'm under NDA and can't mention.
I would expect nothing less.
But it will also deliver in dividends for those hopefully using and occupying it once constructed, but it meets high sustainability aspirations. It's in a key part of town, and I believe it will house about 1,000 workers. In its space. So very different than the residential tower that has just been launched, but certainly a significant piece of architecture to add to the mix.
Okay. There's a bit of an ignorant question that I have.
Love it. Isn't there no such thing as a stupid question?
There is this perception, I suppose, that SOM are, for lack of a better word, skyscraper specialists, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, A, is that true? B, if it is true, does it impact the way that you bid for work across multiple disciplines?
I think that's a great question because for sure, that is probably the first. If I gave you a blank piece of paper and I said, I'm going to spout a name at you and you tell me the first thing comes to mind, probably skyscraper. Certainly in this part of the world with Burj in our backyard, it would be what comes up. And in most major cities, that would probably still be the same. Yeah. That's not all that we do by any means. Not even close, to be honest. We have a huge presence in planning. We just completed Sultan Hytham City in Oman, which is now under construction, which is re-envisioning what housing for all just outside the city can look like in a more sustainable, focused way. But we have many disciplines. We have structural engineering. We have wayfinding and signage. We have landscape architecture. We have interior design and interior architecture that carries all the way down to product design. We have outdoor furniture that we're designing. So yes, skyscrapers.
And
more. Much more. Yes. Okay. It's still quite a small practice, though. I just want to say that because I think when people think of SOM, there's a bit of an ambiguity with those three letters. And since my name isn't Emily Skidmore, there's no singular person or three trios to kind of look to in the legacy. But in the end, we're about 1,000, a little over 1,000 people globally. And that includes everybody. That's the designers, that's the administrative staff, that's everybody in between. Yeah. So that's quite small if you were to compare us to a lot of our competition.
If I had a spitball, I would have gone 5x that easily.
Yeah. And I think our clients think that too. But that's also to say, we will do universities. We will do all types of typologies. There's very little that we won't tackle. But I think you're probably right. People first think skyscrapers and then maybe, we're a little typecast, but we're trying to break out of that.
Okay, cool. I mean, clearly you guys are doing a good job with it. I mean, the kind of work if you just look at from where we are sitting today in the SOM office on Sheikh Zayed Road, I think within a kilometer radius, you kind of have 3 build projects and 1 upcoming, in just a kilometer radius and across multiple typologies, multiple complexities. So I think you've broken it.
Well, I think it's actually a good point because we are trying to become more local.
Right.
And what used to be maybe 3 main offices way back in the day, both New York, Chicago, and our West Coast offices, San Francisco and LA, have really pivoted. That's part of why I have moved over from New York. It's partly why we have offices now in Australia, in Seattle, in Austin, Texas, in Hong Kong, and so forth. So the point being is that we recognize that we want to be able to see our clients. They probably want to be able to talk to us in between phase deliverables.
True.
And just become a lot more local.
Okay. And do you think the reason why I asked the question is more because of our neighbor next door, which is Saudi, which seems to be the current hotspot for most people.
True.
However,
it is having a moment.
Yeah. Off late meaning over the last month, sort of had the first time ever that there's been not that much interest because of a lot of reasons internally with, the way that the projects are going and so on and so forth, which I don't want to get into. But there was always this interest from firms to be based out of a city like Dubai and then service the Middle East.
Yes.
Rather than be based in, say, Riyadh or Doha or Bahrain or, whatever it may be, and service the Middle East from there. So I guess I'm curious from an international point of view, because I suppose myself and most designers here are quite siloed in our little echo chamber of, Dubai. But why would you want to pick Dubai to base operations out of as compared to anywhere else?
Well, I should also add that we have an office in Saudi. We opened an office in Riyadh in 2022. Riyadh, as it's maturing, is changing how they would like to do business. And we're trying very hard to keep up with however they would like to do business. However, the truth remains that we opened this office in 2016. And at the time, it was simply a business development office. Who's here? Somebody who's here can take meetings, somebody who can be on the time zone to answer the phone. And then and for the first 5 years, maybe, it was quiet. It was incredibly quiet here. And we had to really think about how best to utilize the team here and what was the future going to look like. So now it's in complete contrast to that, of course. And we have an active team. We've grown the office. We've taken on more floor space here in this office. And we're still continuing to look at our talent in Riyadh. They're just completely different. And they're at different stages of their own development. I mean, we're sort of comparing a city to a country right now in this conversation. But if we were to kind of pinpoint maybe Riyadh to Dubai, there's a ton of movement. And I think the biggest difference really is that Dubai has had this development over the last 15 to 30 years. Yourself having grown up here, you've seen it. I don't have to tell you anything. Whereas there, it has huge aspirations to make everything happen quite fast and the resources to do it. And they're pushing everything as fast as they can in order to do it. I think the metro opening is probably the best example of that.
Yeah.
Their metro system has now opened. It has created a new urban vitality. It's given people agency to go as they please, not have to deal with parking cars.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways, it gives us an opportunity here to kind of self-reflect and say, is this working? Does this need to keep going? How should it keep going? As an office, we tend to position ourselves next to metro stations. It's just easier for everybody to get to work.
Yeah.
But this is one of our few offices that really struggles with parking and dealing with the commodity of who has a parking spot and do we have enough parking spots? And is there a better way to do this? So they're very different.
Okay. I am recalling one of the talks that I heard you give.
Oh, at Livable Cities.
Yeah,
Yes.
at Livable Cities, wherein you had actually said something which I thought was one of the most honest things I'd heard in a very long time. And it scarred in my memory. No, but it was a very true thing. And the reason I bring it up is because we're talking about, how there are these differences between, say, Riyadh and Dubai. Interestingly, even more so from someone like SOM looking at it.
Yes.
Fairly externally and unbiasedly to an extent. And what you had mentioned was, I think the topic was about cultural sensitivity and designing for context and place, so to speak. And I think someone in the audience was basically like, what do you think about mashrabiyas and passive design and things like that? And I believe what you had said was, we've been doing that, for a decade and we're kind of over it even at this point. We're looking at so much more. And I thought that was brilliant because I'm like, yes, someone finally said it. Yes, mashrabiyas work. Yes, they're cool and all of that. But, very 2004, so to speak. So the reason why I bring that up is because with projects becoming ever so tight in timelines, complexity is increasing.
For sure.
How do you sort of push the needle and still be within context?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a real challenge, isn't it? I mean, obviously, mashrabiyas, there's a reason why they ever came to be from a sustainability standpoint, from a livability standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, all of these things. The goal is how do we re-envision all of those important factors into what the future looks like? That's the important piece. I think from an SOM perspective, we're not a singular name. There isn't one person's name on the door that is the singular voice. This isn't a architecture firm in that sense. It's a collective. And it's a collective of all of those other consultants that I mentioned, and they all give value. So kind of like how you get multiple people in a room that have nothing to do with each other to some degree and solicit their opinions, you get a completely different design than if it has come from one. At the end of the day, all of these buildings, all of these spaces, all of these plans are for people who are all different. So I think the collective for me works. I've worked for architects before, so I think this works. That's why I've been with the firm for as long as I have. And there isn't a single voice. So you don't necessarily know that maybe Mashrek Bank is our design, or you don't necessarily know because there isn't a singular design thing that's been proliferated throughout the entire portfolio. I think that's really interesting and makes a lot more sense because you're trying very hard to listen to your client, understand their needs, come up with ideas on how to solve the problem, but also layer in the 90-year history that the firm has, the current technology that you're working with today, the sustainability reality of what you need to do. Every one of us has this responsibility now, and you need to layer in all these other perspectives on how you marry this together. So the answer is not a mashrabiya, but the answer lies somewhere not much farther beyond.
It's in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, they're in exactly.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was actually wondering more about, I suppose, identity also to an extent, because I find, I suppose when you work with single owner, stakeholder, so to speak, wherein there is sort of that one voice, at least on a client end. And if they are from the region, I've found that defining what context is to them is a very difficult thing. Because on the one hand, someone like myself, even for example, who's kind of, grown up here, there is the history to an extent, but there's also kind of trying to find what works now while still working with the past, so to speak. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you ever find yourself pitching something or kind of informing a client about something which is way too out there? wherein they're like, yeah, this doesn't really sit well with us, but the numbers and the data show that it should. Does that ever happen?
I think we have a great local client. I'm going to keep names off of the record,
Sure.
but we pitch crazy to this client all the time. Technically once a month by our contract.
Like, keep it coming. I need my monthly dose.
But these are not so crazy that they're just his. These are ideas that we have that we're putting out there. They're possible. They're incredibly possible. In many ways, I would think of them maybe as white papers. These are possibilities. If you go back and look in the recent history, we have urban sequoia, which was the concept of what if we took the skyscraper and it became this sustainable version of itself? What does that look like? And what could it accomplish? And how would we cool it? And how would we heat it? And how would we keep the fresh air rolling and so forth? That's not the only one. I think perhaps a good built example on a very small scale is a pavilion that we did for our client here. It was produced for the COP event, which took place, I believe, a year and a half ago.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Maybe 2 years ago now. And it was very short order turnaround, where they decided that they needed to have a pavilion present and they wanted to really push the envelope of what this thing could really say for them and as a representation of their organization. And so we immediately started looking at these bio bricks. We, of course, didn't just make a box. We could have made our lives simpler and just made a quick tent.
Yes.
That didn't happen.
Yeah.
So there was double geometries, complex curvatures, these bio bricks at play. And anyway, it was all very intense in the way that you sort of plan for and build for an event and a time that you have. It's a completely different type of architecture than I would argue SOM is used to.
Yes.
And it came off successfully. And it came off so successfully that they asked that when the event was done, that it is dismantled, but then reconfigured in their HQ so that they could keep using it. It certainly was a bit of an icebreaker. You could hold a meeting in there. You could have a mini event. Didn't seat so many, but enough. And it was a great continued use of it. A completely different scale than what probably people think of SOM, but definitely a successful story.
Oh, very cool. I don't think I've ever heard of biobricks being used in a very real world example that way.
I'll send you some pictures.
Which is quite cool. Awesome. Well, sort of shifting gears in a little bit.
Sure.
I'd like to because it's always fascinating for me to speak to someone like yourself who to some degree sees the city of Dubai in a fairly new
Sure. I am a newbie.
filter, so to speak. So it's always nice to, speak to someone like yourself and get, your insights on things. So I guess what I wanted to ask is, and I know we spoke about this briefly off air, this particular market is quite unique in the way that it operates, in the way that it runs, expectations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is it perfect? By no means. Close even. If you could wave a magic wand, so to speak, and change one thing, any one thing, be it across design, contracts, materiality, supervision, or whatever. If you could change one thing which you think would really push the needle forward, what do you think that would be?
The public transportation.
Okay.
Hands down. The public transportation exists, is highly used, is great, is clean, completely different than what I'm used to. Boarding the metro, the MTA in Brooklyn, heading into Manhattan every day, completely different. And all positive accolades. It's just not enough. It's not even close to enough.
Right.
And having been a resident of New York and before that London, I hadn't touched a car to drive to get to my everyday life activities or my family's for almost 20 years before I moved here. And that's been the biggest shift for me personally, but also it affects everything. It affects the culture of the office. It affects people leaving and walking to the metro together and deciding, you know what, maybe we'll go have a coffee. Maybe two of us are going to go grab dinner, that kind of thing. And you don't have that in a car-focused world. And the heat is the heat, but you can still have an amazing metro system. You can still have an amazing public transport system. It can be light rail and buses and all of these other pieces that fully connect and run seamlessly.
True.
That would be the one thing, hands down.
Okay.
I can keep going. I've got long lists. I've been making my list, but we can only take one thing at a time.
No, I think you're right. I was in conversation with a designer, I want to say at ACOM. And I think given the whole sort of 2040 master plan and things like that that's happening, there's a significant amount of metro lines coming on.
Correct.
So much so that I was shocked. I was like, really? And
you don't hear about it so much. The advertising of it isn't exactly there.
Yeah. And I then had to ask, I'm like, do we need these many? I mean, when you see it sort of overlaid on each other, I mean, not that it's anywhere near London, but it's starting to look like that. I was like, do we really need those many? And their immediate answer was, this is still short of what the
Interesting.
requirement is. I'm like, wow, that is insane. I guess I never really think of those many people in Dubai at the same time, but I suppose there are.
Oh, for sure. SOM had a great opportunity to present a few designs to the RTA for iconic stations. And I understand that they were to select one of the schemes, but they ended up selecting two of our schemes. And so we're really excited about kind of the next step of that and watching those become realized and ideally becoming part of the design build team that pushes that forward.
Right.
But the reality of, I could have said a lot of things to you to answer your question, frankly. I could have talked about more sustainability measures. I could talk about more affordable housing. I could talk about how the housing works for the locals. I could talk about many things. But public transportation ends up affecting all of us and kind of leveling out the types, right? We've got all types in this town.
Yeah.
And the minute that becomes uniform and accessible to all, everyone's got the agency to go where they need to go. It just completely changes the entire city.
Yeah. I think there's a beautiful quote that keeps coming to mind whenever I talk about this topic, which is, I don't know who said it and I'm sure I'll butcher it, but it was pretty much along the lines of, a city is successful not when the poor can afford a car, but more when the rich use public transport.
Yep.
And to me, that clicked so well because I mean, you don't need to look far to see that that's kind of what the issue is. And yeah, I think giving more of an offering probably, and more quantity, of course, because I mean, to be honest, as much as I've lived on the metro, so to speak, especially in uni, because it was a lifesaver. There's a lot of like T-squares and folders and everything in the metro. Like
large portfolios, flat pieces of material.
But having said that, I mean, it's to go today in rush hour is daunting, even for me, having done that entire thing. So I completely get that.
There's so much more that can be done. I mean, I studied for my licensing exams while commuting an hour into Manhattan every single day.
Okay.
I've read books on the subway. I've lost myself in the commuting time. And, it really just changes the day-to-day process. I'm not saying every metro ride, every subway ride is a joy.
Life-changing
Let's not forget that I came from the city, but it changes the dynamic of the city. Even for us, we talk about, we're building a team here, right? One of my remits is, of course, to find talent and to continue to grow this office. And part of growing the office is building a culture within the office and finding things that we all can go do together. And I've learned a lot, even in just the short period of time here, of trying to gather everybody, because even in something as simple as saying, let's go do X, the second question is, do we have enough cars? Can we fit enough people? Do we have enough people with, are we hiring? Okay. Like that's the second question after the fun thing. It's the downer question, right? It's like, well, how are we getting, Now we can all jump in Ubers and we can all take taxis and Kareem is lovely, but there's a connectivity to the city that it really needs to find. I'll give you one other example, just because I seem to be becoming a bit of an urbanist, and that is bicycling. So I don't live terribly far from the office, purely by design, because I want to be able to be here and maximize my time, mainly because we work across so many of our time zones. But one day, in my frustration of driving, I said, I'm going to grab a Kareem bike and I'm going to take it to work. It cannot be that hard. I am in the same distance here as I was from Brooklyn to Manhattan to our office at 7 World Trade Center. I'm sure I can do this. Well, I got close.
I was going to ask him, like, okay. Depends on which side of the road you were on. Sure.
Yes, I think I learned. I think if I go the complete opposite way, I might be able to actually connect those two. But I did reach a knuckle and I did spin in circles and I did end up having to just sort of, in my frustration, leave it. I asked many questions. I tried different routes. And after the time had doubled in what it should have been, I then said, okay, I'm now missing work. So I have to pivot. But that's crazy, and that bicycle is too heavy to bring on the metro. There could be a world where that's the connectivity, a lighter, more seamless process. Maybe they marry together and it's both of those things. I don't know. But there's some opportunity there for sure.
Yeah. I think that's a conversation where, at least because of the nature of the show, the designers that I speak to, I think that is the conversation which a lot of people are having. There was a lot of talk about quite literally stitching the urban fabric together, because Dubai sort of developed in these pockets, so to speak. And these pockets then had to be connected by these highways, for lack of a better word. just because of just the way that the development happened. But now that there is sort of infill everywhere, I think people are now thinking about, hey, but how do I want to get from community A to community B? I can see the building, but I can't walk there. You know, that kind of question.
Yep.
So I think you're right. I think that's, and you do see a lot of projects kind of addressing this. There was this entire loop thing by, URB. There was a couple of other projects where it's sort of all fostering this commuting experience, which is quite public in nature. So yeah, I think we're on the right track. Yeah. So at this junction in the episode, I typically like to look forward. So I suppose the very obvious question is, what's next for Emily? That could be projects related, work related, whatever it may be. But what's on the sort of horizon that you're kind of going towards?
Well, that's a great question. I always think about the Eames Power of 10 show when you ask a question like that, because I sort of zoom in and zoom out and zoom in and zoom out. And so I've got sort of the near term stuff that really needs to happen like yesterday, and I want to throw gasoline on it and make that happen like as fast as possible. I want to grow this team here and get the right talent and build this to basically being right sized for the work that we have and have in the pipeline. At the same time, I have all sorts of other aspirations, perhaps larger and are going to take more years. And I should just add to that we're not a startup. It's a 90-year-old business at this point or close to it. And I think what's really interesting about that is kind of figuring out what that legacy should look like. I think, we really have leaned into the sustainability aspect. It was always something that was part of our ethos. If you go back and look at Hajj Terminal or National Commercial Bank or some of our more legacy-based projects done before any of us were born, it was the first thing. It was the first stroke, and in light of everything that's happened and happening, which has happened by us, we are trying to remind ourselves the level of responsibility that we need to kind of address. So I think, then I can zoom back out to sort of powers of 10 and say, I have all these other things, right? I've got personal aspirations. I want to find a volunteer focused thing for myself and my kids to go do on the weekends. In New York, we used to clean up the beaches on the weekends and they loved that. And it just kind of connected us back to a community. So trying to figure out what is that here? It's a completely different environment. I'm not sure if that answers your questions, but
It does, because I suppose that question is kind of just to see, because the episodes typically that we have tend to be live for so long, invariably we tend to revisit these episodes. So it's always fun to see, 2 years later, be like,
did anybody do that?
Wonder where Emily is today.
Like keeping them honest.
Yeah, to an extent.
Well, I hope that means we get an opportunity to be back on later on.
100%. There's a couple of guests who have, I think, been on 3-4 times even.
Really? You've had boomerangers.
Yeah.
That's great.
And again, it's so much fun to kind of revisit them. One of the episodes that come to mind was this gentleman called Bass, who's a developer, did the first ever co-living project in the city.
Oh, cool.
Completely breaking norms of many, many kinds, as you can imagine.
Kind of like we live?
Okay. Yeah. But there literally wasn't regulation for it. There wasn't,
Sure.
It was a completely sort of different thing. So our first episode was with him and...
Did it work?
him and the design team kind of figuring it out. And then there was an episode once it was built and operational. And then I think we did a third as well. I'm not sure. But just kind of seeing progression over those years, it was like, wow. And today we're actually recording in the project,
Oh,
it was
great.
so cool. So yeah, 100%.
Well, I think what that affords us is the opportunity to get back together soon-ish once the NDA project that I was mentioning earlier is closer to either unveiling or ideally once we can maybe sit in that space, which would be really fun.
Cool. That'd be cool. All right. As we reach the end of the episode, we have something called the aForm tradition.
Yes.
Which again, we briefly spoke about. I think everyone knows what it is, but for those who don't, it's essentially a question that's been asked by a previous guest, not knowing who the next guest is. You don't know who asked the question. The person who asked the question doesn't know who's going to get the question. And to make matters worse, we tend to randomize these questions. So we have a little question bank, and essentially what we do is we just pull out a question from there.
It's called wild card in my world.
Yeah, a completely wild card. And the thing is, some of them are quite random. Some of them are quite silly. Some of them sometimes are architectural design based. Who knows? Yeah, so I think we have a question for you today, which is, okay. I feel like I might already know your answer to this. But okay, let's go. So your question is,
yes.
If you could choose any superpower for a day, what would it be and how would you use it?
Okay, I will tell you, but when I'm done, I want you to tell me what you thought I was going to say.
Okay.
Okay, great. So my superpower for the day would be the ability to not have to sleep in that day.
Good answer.
Because what that affords me is time. And at the end of the day, time is the commodity. It is. It's not any of the rest of the options that are out there.
Yes.
So, and how would I use it? I mean, goodness. I would spend it. I would spend it and not frivolously.
Yeah.
But no, for sure that would be my superpower.
Okay. All right. My answer was, I suppose, answering the same thing. I suppose I'm going to expose my little comic book fanboy self, but the power to fly, probably. And again, just to save
Similar
time.
too. Yeah. Right.
Because the way that you were sort of describing your commute and, trying to use a bicycle and so on, that would have temporarily at least circumnavigated all of that.
100%. I think
you could have just gone from balcony to home, that kind of situation. But
absolutely,
with the intent to save time eventually. So.
Maybe it could just be whittled down to efficiency.
Yeah.
The goal of efficiency.
Yeah.
In all aspects, for sure. I think that makes the most sense. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Emily, I know that time is very precious. So
thank you for
on
having
behalf
me
of the show, I'd like to thank you for donating your time. The show is only possible because of guests like yourself sharing your insights and, in my opinion, elevating our little design ecosystem over here.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. And we look to having you on in the future.
I can't wait. Thank you.
And for the rest of you guys, we will catch you guys next week. Fellow aFormer, thank you so much for your time. If this episode added any value to you, please share it with anyone who may benefit. If you want to carry on the discussion, please get in touch with us over socials. We are at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. That is at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. Until next time, stay inspired.